In 1985, one man, Bob White, claimed that he'd found a fragment of a UFO.
I was traveling from Denver to Las Vegas with a young lady named Jan. And in the high desert, if it's a bright, clear night and the stars are shining, which it was, you could see forever. I was asleep when she woke me up and asked me what this strange light was. I didn't know. So I stayed awake and we watched it. As we got closer to the light, it got bigger. We stopped the car to look at it. The light was so bright, I had to shield my eyes like this to look at it. She turned the headlights on for some reason. When she did, this thing just shot up in the air that fast. And when it got up in the sky, it connected to another light, and then this object was ejected from it. When I first saw it, it was glowing red, and it just looked like a glob of something. And it was too hot to touch. My first thought was, what in the world could it possibly be? What could this be?
Once the object cooled, White placed it in the trunk. What you are seeing is the actual object White recovered.
This is what it looked like after it cooled down. The only difference is the end piece on here was rounded, and that was cut off for an analysis by Los Alamos.
The jagged fragment, measuring 9 inches in length and weighing over 1.5 pounds, was subjected to isotopic ratio and other elemental composition tests at the U.S. government's Los Alamos National Laboratory. After several weeks of testing, White finally talked to a technician.
He was very excited about it. He said, "This is definitely extraterrestrial. It's something I've been looking for all my life." And I said, "That's wonderful." So I told newspaper columnist Mike O'Brien that. He called and talked to the same scientist. And the same scientist told him that he didn't say that. And he said, "My bosses have instructed me not to talk to anyone about this." And that was the end of the conversation.
Los Alamos would not return phone calls or respond to inquiries for this program regarding the unusual sample. Another anomalous fragment, nearly identical to White's, was found some 40 years earlier. The story was confirmed by declassified U.S. government documents.
They have an object almost identical to this one that was recovered by the CIC, the Counterintelligence Corps, in the 1940s in Denmark. And their words, not mine, their words, is it's a piece of a flying saucer.
Dr. Robert Gibbons is a physicist who's formerly worked at NASA, Northrop Grumman, and Hughes Aircraft. He served in the U.S. Army for over 20 years, and his entire experience he's never encountered anything quite like the Bob White object. In the year 2000, he joined Bob White's team to determine once and for all what this object really is.
So we went to Laughlin, Nevada, and during that time the object affected the batteries in the wall safe at the hotel 3 days in a row. The batteries had died and were broken open the first day. People from the hotel had to come up and put on an electronic meter to open the safe. The meter said the safe is open, yet it was not. So the first night they had to drill it. This happened 2 more nights in a row. There must be some effect coming from the object, some kind of radiation or something causing those batteries to go dead.
This is not anything like we've seen before. There are some very unusual metals in this object that you typically do not find in other alloys.
What's the chance that these elements would end up in this alloy either naturally or accidentally?
I'd have to say pretty much zero.
So this is absolutely a manufactured object.
Looking at a detailed list of all the metals and all the elements that can be found in this object, it's conclusive that they're there by purpose.
This looks like a manufactured piece created by some form of intelligence. Now, could it be made by us, or could it have been made by an extraterrestrial?
We're looking at something much more advanced than what we're currently familiar with today.
We are now sitting down with two scientists who are brave enough to come out and speak to us. And even though the institutions they're affiliated with requested to remain anonymous, we are uncovering new clues that are being discovered about Bob White's object.
I did two types of tests. The first test I did was an X-ray diffraction analysis.
David Lamb is a research scientist currently at a major university in the U.S. His expertise is in physics and material science, and he spent the past year researching the Bob White object.
What's very unique about this is we have what's called an amorphous peak here. And that amorphous peak tells me that this is a polycrystalline semiconductor.
What's the significance of that? I mean, how anomalous is that?
You don't find that in aircraft aluminum.
Where do you find it?
I'm not aware you find it anywhere. Another thing that's very unusual in this is it has silver in it, and a very high percentage of silver, about 4.3% silver. Silver is only used in aluminum at the experimental stage of superconductivity. If you spray the surface of aluminum with silver, then you enhance superconductivity.
Superconductivity is a phenomenon in some metals that occurs at very low temperatures, resulting in absolutely zero electrical resistance and excludes the interior magnetic field. This means that an electric current introduced to the superconductor can flow and persist freely and indefinitely without any added power source.
Let's say you fire a bullet through a magnetic field, well, it's going to have experienced drag. But what if that bullet was able to superconduct? It would expel the magnetic field, and that bullet would not slow down. It would not experience any kind of drag. So, if this was something traveling through space and it was going through, let's say, Jupiter's powerful magnetic field, it could theoretically expel that magnetic field and zip past Jupiter without experiencing those forces.
Now, with superconductivity, is that difficult to achieve?
Space is the perfect environment for superconductivity. You have to expend no energy to get objects to be superconductive in space.
So if an object were fabricated to travel in space on its own, this would be the kind of object it would be.
Yes. You're going to get the biggest bang for your buck out of the native properties of this object in space.
It's a perfect fit.
We just received a phone call from David Lamb. After conducting additional scientific testing, he now theorizes that Bob White's object is a quasi-crystal of a very complex structure. This type of structure is considered to be the cutting edge of nanotechnology. It didn't exist in 1985, and even today, it's in its early stages of development.
Another anomalous fragment, nearly identical to White's, was found some 40 years earlier. The story was confirmed by declassified U.S. government documents.
They have an object almost identical to this one that was recovered by the CIC, the Counterintelligence Corps, in the 1940s in Denmark. And their words, not mine, their words, is it's a piece of a flying saucer.